says you feel like you're physically fit and able to do the things that are required of you here, and you're not going to hold me responsible for any accident or injury.
This is obviously an assumed risk sport. A person has to know up front, they have to be told by the people who are selling them the equipment or renting them the equipment that there's a chance that they can hurt themselves. There's a chance that they may die on these rivers, and they need to take this into consideration before they lay their money down.
The National Livery Safety Project is important in that it's a true partnership. The program really couldn't take place without the involvement and certainly the eventual use of the materials by the liveries themselves.
Whether you're an outfitter, retailer, or government worker, or private paddler, we've got to realize that we're in this thing together. By working together, the recreational users of the nation's waterways will benefit. Excessive regulations will be curtailed, and we will be successful.
We got trapped by a tree limb, actually a whole tree, and we got trapped behind it. And the guy in the back of the canoe with me was fine, but my leg was trapped underneath the canoe. And we were fine until my head went under the water. Once my head went under the water, it was kind of scary, basically.
There was no information, no tips or anything about safety, anything like that. Just handed a life jacket and a paddle. That was it.
They gave me a life jacket and a paddle and said, "Have a nice day." They didn't give me anything like talk or steer right to go left or anything like that. They just said, "Have a nice trip."
We were coming down through a rapid and the canoe tipped over. I tried to stop the canoe and I got in front of it, and my ankle was pinned underneath the canoe between the canoe and a rock, and there was no way to get out. There was about 6 guys lifting on the canoe before I finally was able to get my leg out from underneath it.
I saw a lot of people in a lot of trouble. The major problem I saw was people that just didn't know what they were doing, like myself.
The impact of Debbie's outing, it's totally changed my life. Something that was supposed to be so fun turned out to be such a tragedy because, you know, they didn't know enough about canoeing to ask, you know, what the conditions of the water was, and the canoe livery place either didn't know or really didn't care about making sure that that they all had life jackets and that the water was safe for them to canoe in. My twin sister Debbie drowned canoeing. Debbie asked for a life jacket and she was told that she didn't need one, that the water was only 2 feet deep and, you know, nothing would happen. They were given 2 flotation cushions in each boat. So Debbie and her fiance Joe decided to cut across the creek to help their friends. And as they crossed the creek, the water around this big boulder became really rough and fast. It threw Joe out one way and Debbie the other way, and the current was so strong that it just took the canoe, swept Debbie and the canoe into this boulder. Debbie was struggling. Her hands were coming up above the water, grabbing this rock, trying to get her head above water so that she could breathe, and it just, she couldn't, they just couldn't get her out.
It is important to take the time to warn people, because if you don't, somebody is going to say, well, gee, we didn't know it could happen. And some of them honestly don't know that it could happen. Some of them really think that that a river is, you know, like Disneyland, and there should be a cop on every rock, and the canoes go down attached by cables. And you need to tell them that this is a different kind of experience that demands a certain kind of responsibility from them.
A lot of people have totally a different picture of what's going to happen out there, that they could have an upset and what's going to happen other than getting wet.
I think that the people that have a successful trip are the ones that primarily come with the idea that they want to paddle. Not everybody comes with that idea. Then after that, I think that the amount of help that we give the people means a lot to the success of their trip.
Well, risk management for me is a term that means managing the risk that we are exposed to in the canoe industry. Within all of our literature that we send out, we include safety tips and seasonal tips. Hypothermia obviously is a consideration in the springtime. We keep posted American Canoe Association posters in both of our outdoor centers that are safety related. And so risk management to me is more managing people.
When people call us to find out information or make a reservation, we try to properly plan their trip and put them on the right section of river according to their ability. We screen them. We ask them, have you ever canoed before? If we find out that they're beginners, we recommend that they go on the Whitewater section of the river.
I think that the livery operator and the people who rent the boats both have responsibilities. The livery operator is doing several things. One is they are saying that this river is suitable for people of a certain ability. They're telling the people what this river is going to be like. When you get them to sign a waiver, don't let somebody sign it without reading it, because hopefully they'd read the waiver and say, there's danger here. You can get hurt, you can even get killed. And that, if they're nervous, will prompt some questions to the livery operators and give the livery operator and the customer the opportunity to decide if the trip is right for them.
The exposure to risk and the level of skill needed to safely paddle a river changes as the water level and the speed of current fluctuates. Outfitters need to establish and consistently follow standards which take these changing conditions into account.
On a normal day, I'll be down here at 7:30 and call in river report. We have a pole that we call our Bible pole. In the green, we pretty much let anything go, kids and tubes, rafts. And we have our green-yellow where we're cautioning people, requiring life jackets to be worn on everyone, not just the children. And then we have the yellow section where we run rafts only. Of course, we close at a certain point.
We can educate ourselves to the best of our abilities and get standards that are consistent in all staff. Every person that we hire goes through our little training program. He has a little manual that we would like him to follow. He has briefing cards that he learns, so that we're saying the same thing and the right things consistently to our people before they get on the water.
It's important to realize that even though this video will help the guest understand some of the hazards and some of the techniques they need to know, it can't replace what you do with them when you're putting them on the water. Your brief is very important. It's also important that when you begin to work with your guests, that they understand that if there's an emergency, a tree's down, their boat's pinned in a tree, what should they do? Many of us put our phone numbers right on the life jackets. Some have placards on the canoe. Most of us put our phone numbers on the paddle. That phone number is their initial contact.
A life jacket is one of the most important parts of a river trip. The vest must be in good shape. Anytime we get a vest which is torn, frayed, looking old, the label off, it's discarded. It's cheap insurance to have good equipment. And it's also very important to instruct people on the proper use of a life vest. Life vest won't do you any good if it's not accessible, if it's tied in, if it's not on properly.
A non-swimmer needs to be talked to in a pretty special way, and particularly to make sure that they wear a life jacket, because a lot of them won't. Most of the livery drownings I've seen have been non-swimmers that aren't wearing life jackets because they don't want to look silly in front of their friends.
The worst accidents are, of course, fatalities, and when you deal with the number of people that we do, you're always going to have accidents. We do our best to prevent accidents. We just try to minimize the risk and reduce them to the best of our ability.
The injuries I've seen on the river basically deal with people doing dumb things like having water fights with paddles.
The guy dove out of his boat and he split open his head and dislocated his shoulder.
We did have a kid lose the tip of his finger, and they were having naval maneuvers and they were ramming each other, and his fingers were over the gunnel of the boat.
There have only been 2 recorded canoe-related drownings in the history of this river. Each of those were beginners in flood stage water. It was way beyond their individual skills.
Well, anytime you have a river with rapids, deep water boating, you're always going to have hazards. Swimming accidents are are one of the biggest problems. Generally, if people do what we tell them, wear their life vests, remain sober, it's a very safe trip. It really boils down to people have to take some responsibility for themselves.
On the river, we often see a lack of respect or a lack of awareness of extreme conditions. And the most extreme condition that we have the most problem with is cold water, and that's because it's not obvious. If someone comes to paddle on a nice, warm, sunny day in the springtime, they don't realize quite how cold the water is going to be. We need to make sure they're prepared and they're aware of that condition because it isn't obvious.
Many, many times I have come up to somebody blue lips and shivering, and their life vest is laying on the ground or in the boat beside them. A life vest is just like a down vest in the wintertime. It's 1-inch closed-cell ethafoam that keeps you warm. When they get in this water for 60 seconds in the springtime and the outside temperature is 45, 50 degrees, they have to be concerned about hypothermia.
They may not understand the force of the current and the fact that it's going to be pushing their boat around and it's going to be causing them to need to steer in order to navigate a safe course down the water. If they don't know how to control their boats, if they don't know how to steer, they can get pushed into situations where they don't want to be. And that's when accidents happen, and that's when people get hurt.
Anyone who has ever been frightened out in the water realizes how much the fear and panic work against you and can make even a strong swimmer lose the ability to protect themselves. And here these people are out in the water. There are these strange currents that are affecting them that they really don't understand. They may be getting banged over rocks. Their gear may be going away from them and chasing them, and they're worried about their rental deposit. They're worried about losing a paddle, and the situation can get really out of control. If they've been drinking, it's just that much worse.
She went downriver and then she got out of her tube. She had a 0.27 alcohol content. And the coroner said the lady didn't know which way was up, down, backwards, or forward in his coroner report that she didn't know she drowned, all right? And, but she was the exact same lady who signed our release form. If you had the proper signs and the proper instruction and the proper response, people got to be responsible for what the hell they do in life.
Alcohol is definitely a problem on the river.
Well, I think the biggest problem we have now, which has changed over the years, is the amount of alcoholic beverages or drugs that are being consumed.
Most of the accidents are alcohol related.
Alcohol does not go with the river. So we just went to a policy of absolutely no alcoholic beverages. A lot of people told us we were crazy, it was going to hurt our business, and we did gamble. Actually, it made our business grow because we started to bring family into the business.
We think that alcohol and drugs both interfere with what we call survival reflexes, so that somebody who falls overboard without a life jacket somehow becomes disoriented and disappears. This is what's called the sudden disappearance syndrome.
Someone calling for help, struggling, reaching in the air, going up and down 3 times in the water is not your typical drowning situation. It's a myth. Someone who's drowning may look like they're playing in the water. You may have less than 60 seconds to react. What kind of reaction? Depends on your training.
Staff training must go on a regular basis. Hopefully the kind of training needed to respond to an emergency situation isn't going to be needed. And if it's needed on an infrequent enough basis that skills get rusty. People need to be reminded of what they need to do to respond to someone in an emergency. And your staff needs to go through regular training sessions so those skills will be current, so those skills will be instinctive whenever there's a situation that occurs on the water.
Training is available from the American Canoe Association, the Red Cross, many state organizations, and local paddling clubs. They'll teach you some of the techniques on how to rescue someone in the water. It's not difficult, but it's important you know how to do it properly.
When you're standing at your counter and somebody runs up to you saying, "We got an emergency on the river," or the phone rings and it's a landowner and he says, "You've got somebody pinned on the river," that's not the time to come up with some kind of plan.
A lot of livery operators, just like any other business person, doesn't like to think about emergency plans, but fact is some attention needs to be given early on to what's going to be done. And for a smaller operation, it might be knowing beforehand who to call, which rescue squad has responsibility for your area and can get there quickly.
You really need to be thinking ahead of time as to how you're going to handle even the worst situation, a drowning. The news media is going to be there knocking at the door. The family is going to be upset. The friends are going to be upset. You have to have some kind of pre-plan.
In those spots that you've had problems, you'll need to develop ways of getting down there because they're going to call you, and how you handle it really is important not only for the safety of the customer, but also depending on whether you're going to be sued. From the lawsuits that I've been involved with, one of the common denominators is the people were hurt and they didn't think that the people they were dealing with really cared.
You want to keep good records of what has occurred. 3 elements are document, document, and document. 8 years down the road, when you're faced in a jury, you won't remember unless you've had good documentation. Follow the procedures set by your outfitter. And show, most importantly, we know we need to show that we care. We can't turn our back on a person who's cut or has a broken limb. We can't turn our back on the family who has just lost a loved one. We have to get involved at a caring level and be there through the whole process.
I think that you should treat every person that you rent that boat to as if they were your daughter, friend, or son, and make it sure that it's as absolutely safe as possible for these people to go out, because they're depending on you to make sure that it's safe. They have no idea what they're doing. You're the ones that are in this business.
I've seen too many people get in some real terrible situations. And once again, they're novices. They really have not thought about what they're doing out there. They have no idea what the consequences are, that yes, you can be killed.
So take the time to be with your guest and share with them your knowledge and your experience, and continue to learn yourself. This is a great business to be involved in, and we can learn so much year after year and share that with the people who come to us, and we'll have more people out on the water as a result of that, and they'll have a good time.